Hey everybody. So I've been told that we are now live. My name is Jesse Barnum. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to give it about 30 seconds or so, and then I'm going to jump right in. All right, we're getting some chat messages already. Wow, people from around the world. Very cool. People from Italy and Turkey tuning in. This is really neat, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jesse Barnum. I'm here today to talk about MirrorSync 7. I'm the president of 360Works. I'm also the primary developer for MirrorSync. I've been working very hard on it, and I hope that you guys will like what I have to show off today. I would like to start off by saying that this is the first time we've done this format. I've done some Zoom user group presentations, but we're trying YouTube Live today. This is my first time doing this, so I hope that there's no technical glitches. But if anybody notices a problem, please post it in the chat, and I'll try to pay attention to that. I've got a lot of different screens open, so if I miss it, I've got some other people that will hopefully let me know if there's a problem. I have tried to make my presentation about 45 minutes long. So, maybe 45, 50 minutes for presentation time. And if you have questions, please post them in the chat as I'm going. If I notice them as I'm talking, and if it's relevant to what I'm talking about now, I'll try to address them as I go. Otherwise, I'll hopefully have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end to answer questions. I'm going to do my best to wrap up by 2 o'clock Eastern time. So with the clock ticking, I'm going to go ahead and get started with some of the stuff I'm talking about. So first of all, who am I? Who's Jesse? I think I've probably met a lot of the people that are tuning in on this. If you've been to Engage or DevCon, good odds are good that we've talked before. But if I haven't met you before, just a little bit about me. I founded 360Works in 1996. I am the creator of MirrorSync, SafetyNet, and Zulu, as well as a lot of other products, but those are the ones that I work on the most. MirrorSync is the one that I spend most of my time in. And I also do a lot of the tech support tickets for MirrorSync. So if you've ever contacted support and asked a question about MirrorSync, odds are good that you've either talked to me or Adam about whatever your issue was. I have been doing FileMaker for a long time, started in 1992. And over the years, I've presented many times at FileMaker Developer Conference, at Pause on Error, various user groups around the country. I do miss the old days of getting on a plane and traveling to meet people. So now it's all Zoom. But I'll just put this out there. If anybody runs a user group meeting and gets together physically, and you would like to have me come and talk at your user group meeting, please let me know, because it's a really special experience to be face-to-face with people presenting instead of looking at a microphone or a camera. As you can tell from my pictures, I love camping, I love motorcycles, and my favorite thing is motorcycle camping. So that's a little bit about me. Let's talk about what MirrorSync is. I'm guessing that if you're on this call, you already have some idea of what MirrorSync is, but I think it's important to explain what it does, because some people just use certain aspects of MirrorSync and don't understand everything that it does. So I want to be a little bit thorough here and talk about all the different ways that you can use MirrorSync. So FileMaker Server can run with multiple different types of servers. FileMaker is one, and it's what we talk about the most, but we also support MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, Salesforce, DynamoDB, Redshift, anything with a custom API, and anything that has JDBC custom data sources. So I think the most common thing that people use MirrorSync for is our client-to-server syncing, which syncs FileMaker Pro or Go. Most people use FileMaker Pro or Go with MirrorSync, syncing it to FileMaker Server, but it will actually sync to any of the databases on this list. So if you wanted to sync FileMaker Pro to Salesforce or FileMaker Go to MySQL, or if you wanted to sync SQL Server to Oracle, or you wanted to sync MySQL to DynamoDB, you can do any of that with MirrorSync. So all the databases on this supported list. Let me make sure I can see my chat window. Oh, cool. Japan, Texas, all over the place. Italy, Turkey. Thank you guys very much. It's fun watching the chats. Oh, but I can only see the chats if OBS is my front window. All right, I'll try to switch back and forth between windows so I can see what the chats are. So server to server. So what do developers use MirrorSync for? I'm going to talk about 4 use cases that I think are interesting for server-to-server syncs, and then 4 use cases that I think are really cool for client-to-server syncs. So this first one I'll talk about, this is a friend of mine who actually used to work with us, and he now is involved in the NASCAR race car industry, and he runs 6 warehouses in Southern California. They found that it was much faster to run FileMaker Server in each warehouse than to have one centralized FileMaker Server with all of them syncing with each other. So they use MirrorSync to keep all of those servers together. So they have 6 separate FileMaker servers, and they use MirrorSync to keep them all in sync. So there's one main server, which in MirrorSync terminology is called the hub, and then there's 5 secondary servers that in MirrorSync terminology are all called the spokes. So they run those syncs, I believe, every 10 or 30 seconds. So if you make a change to the inventory in one database, within 10 or 15 seconds, it's all going to be updated in the other 5 warehouses. One of our oldest customers, because we had support for Salesforce back in version 2 or 3 of MirrorSync. So one of our early customers for Salesforce was an African safari tour company. They had a FileMaker system for a long time that they used to build their itineraries in FileMaker, but they added a Salesforce component that they use for prospecting and new business. And so they use MirrorSync after a client or a customer approves a project or a tour to sync that all to FileMaker, so they have all of the customer Salesforce information available to them when they go to start assembling that tour itinerary for the customer in FileMaker. The project that I was probably the most personally involved in of all of the case studies I'm going to talk about is this one. I worked with Molly Connolly from Thorson Consulting. Her customer, Chicago Public Schools, has a FileMaker system that she built for them to manage a selective enrollment process. So, literally 40 to 60,000 parents per year will apply for these programs every year with their kids, and FileMaker manages the whole process of which kids get offered which seats depending on their economic situation and test scores and all those kinds of things. And then every year they need to publish that information, and 40,000 people will simultaneously log on to access that information. So FileMaker clearly can't handle that load. They tried it in MySQL, that couldn't handle it either. Oracle couldn't handle it. We use MirrorSync to sync their FileMaker database to DynamoDB, which is the database that runs Amazon.com. And that we didn't even notice a difference whether it was 1 user or 40,000 users connected. So MirrorSync can be a really great scalability solution for a web application if you have this rich, detailed FileMaker system, but you need a high volume, high transaction per second web application. You can use MirrorSync with any of the databases on that slide, but DynamoDB is probably the powerhouse of them all as far as transactions per second. One of our hosting clients recently approached us. They have their main office is in Illinois. They wanted to add a branch office in Texas, and they wanted a failover feature. So we use MirrorSync. So we put a FileMaker server for them in each location with our hosting services. And then we use MirrorSync to keep those 2 servers in sync. We then used AWS Route 53 DNS failover so that wherever you are in the world or the country, you'll connect to whichever server is closer. Everybody has one host name. There isn't like a Texas host name and an Illinois server. There's just one host name. And whenever you connect into that with FileMaker Pro, you get automatically routed by AWS to whichever server is closer to you, which is cool. To make it even cooler, if either of those servers goes down, AWS will detect that, and it'll start publishing different DNS results to reroute all of the people to the one server that's up and running. When the server that was down comes back up, MirrorSync will detect that. It'll sync them back up so that all the changes were made on the live server get put back onto the server that was recovered, and AWS will then start routing all the traffic back to both servers again. So there's lots of ways that you can use MirrorSync for server-to-server applications. Clustering, failover, high volume, multiple geographic distributions for multiple offices or warehouses. And so moving on from there to talk about client-to-server uses. This is the classic case that I think most people on this call are probably most familiar with, is syncing FileMaker Pro or Go with FileMaker Server or some other centralized database. So this first one, I think, is my favorite use of MirrorSync. It's a really cool thing. We donated the license to a friend of mine, Marty Thomason, who's also based in Atlanta. I'm in Atlanta, for those who don't know. A friend of mine, Marty Thomason, was working with Youth with a Mission, and they have hospital ship. They have a hospital ship that goes along the coast of Papua New Guinea with a bunch of doctor volunteers on board, and they will go to these remote villages and provide ophthalmology and dental services. And they take FileMaker with them on laptops, iPads, and iPhones. They work with no internet at all. And then when they get back on board their ship, they sync all that to the ship-based FileMaker server, and the ship then syncs that to a shore-based server in Sydney over a very slow satellite connection. And MirrorSync runs all that, and that was a project that we donated MirrorSync to because it's a really, really cool project that I was very excited about. One of our earliest customers, IMS, has a vertical market application that they use for emergency first responders. So if you're in the state of Ohio, which is where they operate, and a firefighter or EMT comes to your house and puts you in an ambulance, odds are good that somebody is going to be entering your patient's vital information using the IMS vertical market application to enter all of that information into an offline FileMaker Go application in the back of the ambulance while they're driving to the hospital. And when they arrive at the hospital and they have stable Wi-Fi, they sync that up, and the syncs typically take 4 to 6 seconds. So by the time they're rolling you through the doors, your information and your vitals and everything like that are already in the hospital's FileMaker system that IMS has created in their vertical market application. And I believe that Chris Rogers is on this call. And so Chris has a vertical market called Tour Pro. He's one of our heaviest duty MirrorSync customers. Chris and IMS account for a lot of MirrorSync usage. He has a vertical market Tour Pro, and it manages competitive dance tournaments. And he has over 500 customers who use his application. And so it's very high volume. They sync it very frequently. It's used in 5 countries around the world. And so in a typical week, Tour Pro is used to run more than 10,000 syncs from 5 countries around the world to Chris's servers that he runs Tour Pro on. And then the last one is a little bit more mundane than some of the kind of very cool exotic examples I've been giving you, but I put it in this list because I don't want people to think that MirrorSync is only for if you are like working in the desert or a nuclear facility or something like that. So a recent customer of ours is EPB Office Products. They're a small business based in Canada. The owner, Cindy, contacted me because she travels a lot, and she wanted to be able to manage her orders and her inventory from anywhere in the world. With her, her employees are working in Canada, and she travels to Hawaii and Europe frequently, and she wanted to be able to just have a copy of that database that she could see everything and make changes on and sync it back up to the server. And so that's a very ideal use case for MirrorSync. It's a little bit unusual in that most of our customers, when they think MirrorSync, they think iPhones and iPads. She's using it on a MacBook Pro, and MirrorSync works just fine on a MacBook Pro. All the demos I'm going to be doing today are going to be on my MacBook Pro. So it works the same whether you're on a laptop, an iPhone, or an iPad. And also worth noting is that we give MirrorSync away for one device. So in Cindy's case, she's actually using MirrorSync for free. We did some consulting with her to do the initial setup, but there's no license cost for her to use MirrorSync because she's using it on one device, and one device comes for free with MirrorSync with no limitations or expiration or anything like that. So I put that last slide in there to kind of say that MirrorSync is really helpful for Office applications too. So that's what MirrorSync is for. Let me jump over and just check chat really quickly. I want to make sure I'm not missing any important questions here. All right, I'll keep going. So let's talk about what is new in MirrorSync 7. We've spent a lot of time developing MirrorSync 7, but I would say that just about everything that we've done that is not a bug fix falls into one of three categories. Easier and faster deployment to your end users, especially for initial syncs, and I'm going to be showing some demos of this. The server-side initial sync with email notifications was the last feature that I added to MirrorSync 7, and I'm really glad that I did because it turns out that it's a hugely important one. I'm not going to be demoing multi-file solutions, so I'll talk about that. In MirrorSync 6 and earlier, it was really challenging if you had like a separation model or a multi-file data file that had multiple files on it, because you can't easily send those to an iOS device. It's easy for a laptop. You just zip it up and you send it to the laptop and you unzip it. But there's no built-in unzip feature for iOS. And so it was hard to send multiple files to users. So with the advent of a launcher file that I'm going to demo for you in just a minute, you can now have a classic separation model or any sort of multi-file solution, because all you're going to be distributing to your user in MirrorSync 7 is this little launcher file. And the launcher file has the URL in it, and the launcher file is scripted to go and get all the files that it needs and download each one individually onto an iOS device. So that's now supported. Also, I should mention that the launcher file is far easier to use than the download URL. Unfortunately, on an iPhone specifically, it's not bad on an iPad, but on an iPhone, when someone sends you a URL, we counted it, and it's 9 clicks to get that URL to download a file and open it in FileMaker Go. With the launcher file, it's 2 clicks, and it's very simple. They just click the launcher icon, and then they click Open in FileMaker Go, and it's open. So we think that this is going to simplify the process significantly for distributing offline copies to your users in the field. So I'll do some more demos on that in just a minute, but we also have a lot of major speed improvements. My next slide is all talking about those, so I'm going to leave that for my next slide. And then developer features. These ones, I'm going to briefly talk about the sync history database. I'm not going to talk about in this demo the admin API, which is new. The admin API is a JSON HTTP REST API that allows you to control MirrorSync as if you were using the MirrorSync configuration client. So some examples of things you could do with it would be to change the IP address or the database name of a configuration in MirrorSync, install a license key, turn the auto sync off and on, get a list of configurations, trigger a sync to run for server-to-server syncing. And what we're really there's a lot of ways you could use this, but I think that probably the most useful reason to do all these is if you're building MirrorSync into a kind of shrink wrap vertical market solution that you're going to distribute to customers, and you want the installation process to happen automatically. So combined with our a MirrorSync 6 feature that we already have, which is the silent command line installation, you can run MirrorSync just from a terminal command, and then you can use the API to set the license key, import the configurations, modify the configurations for that customer's IP addresses, etc. All that can now be automated through that admin API. And then the last point I'll talk about, which I'm obviously not going to demo, but if you've looked at our documentation before, it was a little hard to use. It really needed work, and so we did the work. We went from top to bottom on all of our MirrorSync documentation, and it's now completely updated for MirrorSync 7, and it's faster and it's easier to find things. So I have a combination of different demos for this today. I have a few pre-recorded demos, and I have some live demos. So the next one I'm going to do is a live demo, and I am going to be talking about, let me jump over to FileMaker for a second. And so the first thing I want to show you is this new sync history database. So this comes with MirrorSync. Let me show you something here. So this is what you get when you download MirrorSync. You get all these files here. And there's one in here called reporting_MirrorSync.fmp12. The way you use that file is that you rename it. First of all, you don't have to use this file. This is if you want this feature, you would do these steps. You rename the file reporting_MirrorSync so that the word reporting is replaced by the name of your solution. In this case, I'm using with FileMaker Starting Point. That's a free solution given away by Richard Carlton Consulting. I use it a lot in my demos because I like Richard Carlton Consulting, and also because it's pretty. It's a lot, and so I'm going to be using FM Starting Point for all of my live demos. And so you just change the name of this file, and you replace the reporting portion of it with the name of your solution. You also make sure that the admin credentials to log into it match the admin credentials to log into your actual solution, so that MirrorSync will have the privileges it needs to create records in there. So what I want to show you right now is that this database is totally empty. There's no records in it. I'm going to move that off the screen, and I'm going to bring the starting point solution onto the screen. So here's FM Starting Point. If you haven't used it before, it looks like this. I'm really going to just be scratching the surface slightly and just looking at contacts. There's a lot more you can do with Starting Point than contacts, but that's what I'm going to focus on for my demo today. And I'm also going to take this chance to show you how the new launcher file works. So we have this other file that comes with MirrorSync called MirrorSync Launcher. As the developer, if you double click this file, it opens up to this screen. Please enter a MirrorSync download URL. And there's a spot here for you to paste in a URL. And if you've used MirrorSync before, you're probably familiar with how the download URLs work. You configure you set up your sync configuration, you create a download link, and then you can email that link to your customers, and they can use that link to trigger a download in their browser. That still works. You can still do that download link. There's no requirement that you change how you're doing it. But if you would like to use this new launcher file, what I'm going to do is I am going to grab my download URL for FM Starting Point. I'm going to paste that into this launcher file. Now I'm going to take this launcher file that I just customized right here. Let me close this so it's not confusing. I'm going to send this launcher file. I'm probably going to rename it to something, and maybe rebrand it and change the logo and just make it look like it's my solution. I'll send this launcher file to a user, probably by an email attachment. And now the user is going to double click the launcher file. And now instead of going into their browser and downloading the file that way, the launcher file will run the initial sync on the server for us. So I'm going to put in my credentials for Starting Point. It is now going to do the same thing that it would have done with that download URL in the browser, but it's doing it from within the launcher file. And then it downloads it to the launcher file, exports it invisibly into my documents directory, and opens it up. So now I'm being prompted now that the file's downloaded, I'm opening it up, and I'm going to go into contacts, and here's my file. So I know this is confusing because I've got the same thing open in two different windows. So let me just stop for a moment and explain what these two windows are. This is the hosted server version of FileMaker Starting Point. And a neat trick you can use, I don't know how neat it is, but just a little tip on telling whether this file is hosted or not. If you go to the File menu and save a copy is grayed out like this, that means that you're opening the file from FileMaker Server. So I know that this is the hosted file. This other file, if I go to the File menu, Save a Copy is enabled, so I know that this file on my right side of the window is a local offline copy of the server. If I were to close this file on FileMaker Server, my local copy would still continue to work just fine. So if I were to run a sync right now, my first sync, I'm prompted to enter a descriptive name of my computer, which I do, and the sync should finish very quickly. It took 0.9 seconds. And so this is what MirrorSync looks like. If you haven't seen MirrorSync before, this is what it looks like. You click sync, it's just running a regular FileMaker script, and the script pops open this message, and then it finishes and tells you how long it took to do that. So I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be focusing on MirrorSync 7 today, so I'm just going to keep my demo really brief in terms of how you use MirrorSync in general. I'm just going to do some create, edit, delete stuff to show you how that works. So I'm going to create a new record in FM Starting Point. This is my offline copy. Notice that it's not here on my server because I'm working in a different copy of the database. I'm going to run my sync. And remember, I used the term hub and spoke. Hub in this case would be your FileMaker server. Spoke would be your offline copies. So in the hub node, we added one record to the contacts table, and that took 1.1 seconds. And I can see that now. This is the hosted version of the file. And I can see that my new record got moved from my offline copy to my hosted copy. So let's make a change on this on the hub. And that change is not on my offline copy. I'll run a sync operation. So this is now an update operation instead of an insert. It modified that record on my offline copy. So this is demonstrating, and there are my changes. So this is demonstrating, first of all, that MirrorSync can update, not just create records, and also that it works in both directions, from the offline copy to the server, from the server back to the offline copy. Now I'm going to get a little bit more interesting. I'm going to start talking about conflicts and merging conflicts. I'm going to go on to the hosted version of my solution, and I'm going to put in my email, and that is my real email address. You're welcome to send me a message. And I will come into the offline version, and I will put in my website. So I've modified the same record on the hub and the spoke, in the hosted version and the offline version. But I've modified two different fields. I modified the email address here and the website here. I'm going to run the sync, and I want to show you what happens. MirrorSync modified one record on the hub, and it modified one record on the spoke, and it took 1.3 seconds. And if I click OK and I look at it, I can see that the changes have been combined. The email change from the hub and the website change from the spoke have been made here, and they've also been made here. So MirrorSync merged those changes together. And that's a powerful feature that greatly reduces the likelihood that you're going to run into problems with users modifying the same records, because as long as they're modifying different fields from each other, there's no problem. MirrorSync is smart enough to tell that this field was modified here, that field is modified there, and it combines them together. Let's get tougher now. Okay, what if we modify the same field? So I'm going to go on the server version, and I'm going to change this category to semi-cold. I'm also going to assign a company here. And now I'm going to go into my offline copy, and instead of semi-cold, I'm going to say this is a hot prospect. So now I've modified the same field on the same record on both the hub and the spoke. So let's run our sync again and see what happens. This is what I'm expecting. The same records were modified both on your local copy and the server for the following tables. Contacts 1, so one record. So I'm going to click this resolve button, and this opens in a separate, it opens off screen. Let me drag it back to here. So here's what this is what your user is going to see. So the user who's running the sync is going to see this. And by the way, this works great on an iPad or an iPhone. So what I'm showing you now here is on a laptop, but the user on the iPad or the iPhone would see basically the same thing, just a little narrower. And I can see what fields changed. I can see in red which field is in conflict. I can click there. I can preview to see what this looked like on the server. I can see what it looked like on the client. I can say, no, this is definitely a hot prospect, so I'm going to pick that one by clicking the right arrow to pick my copy instead of the server copy. And then I can say, okay, I'm finished now. It says your selections have been saved. Close this window and rerun your sync script to apply these changes. So I'm going to close this window. This still says hot prospect. This still says semi-cold. I'm going to run my sync again. And now MirrorSync modified, it didn't complain. It modified one record on the hub and one record on spoke. It took 1.7 seconds. And I see hot prospect. And over here, I also see hot prospect, because that's what I picked in my conflict resolution screen. And notice that the change that I made on the server, 360Works, was not lost. It got merged together with that conflict that got written. So MirrorSync has merged the fields that it can merge, asked the user to resolve the fields that it can't merge, and then it's applied the user's changes. So a very common question that I get asked is, my users are morons. They'll never figure this out. And I'm paraphrasing there, but that's what I get asked all the time. And so there are two other ways that you can resolve conflicts. One way, which is very simple, not always correct, but very simple, is you can pick last change wins. So if it was modified on the server at 12:30 and it was modified on the offline file at 12:45, then we would assume that the one that was changed last must have been the one that was the most correct, and so we would apply that change. If you don't want anybody to ever have to decide which one to keep, you should use that. That's called last right wins, and that can be configured in the MirrorSync configuration process. The other choice, which I think is the best choice if you don't trust your users to resolve conflicts, is called, what I demonstrated here is what we call user picks. So we talked about user picks, last right wins, and there's one other choice, which is admin wins, or admin picks. And in that case, instead of me on my device picking which things to go, should win, the administrator will receive an email with a link, and when they click the link, they'll get the exact same screen that I just showed you guys, and the administrator would then make the correct choices. Perhaps they would call the user, perhaps they would call multiple users, and they would say, hey, let's all talk about which one of these is the correct value, and the administrator would make those choices, and then they would save their choices, and then the user's next sync would apply that administrator selections. So those are three different ways you can deal with conflicts. And as you saw, MirrorSync can merge the conflicts to reduce the likelihood of them happening in the first place. So I'm almost done with this demo. I have one last thing to do, which is I want to show you how deletions work. So I'm going to delete this record I just created. So now I have 2 records in my offline copy, still 3 records in my hosted copy. I'm going to run my sync again, and MirrorSync will very quickly and efficiently compare the records that it knows about with the records that you actually have to find which one is missing, and then it will delete that missing one from the other side. So it took 0.8 seconds for MirrorSync to cross-index those and compare them, and then it deleted that record from the hub, and that's now done. So that is the live demo I wanted to show you. Let me jump back for a second to remember that sync history database I was talking about. Let's take a look at that. So this is new in MirrorSync 7. As you guys recall, when I showed you this before, this had no records in it. It now has 10 records. That's because I just ran 10 syncs in my demo. If you set this file up, and remember I mentioned this is an optional step that if you want to, you can. If you set up this sync history file, every time a user runs a sync, it creates a record in here. And it gives you a ton of information about that. It tells you the name of the device, the time that its MirrorSync record was created, which is basically telling you when it was first synced, which version of MirrorSync script it's running, how many records were inserted, updated, and deleted on the hub, how many records were inserted, updated, and deleted on the spoke. And I can even go into the raw JSON, and there's actually way more information in there that's super detailed about how long it took to scan for deletions, how many milliseconds it took to read changes from the spoke, what type of databases were being synced, etc. So the ping time here, which tells you how many milliseconds it took for that device to talk to MirrorSync. And so you now have a way to get very detailed history about every time that a user runs a sync, and maybe just as importantly, you can modify the script yourself to take actions. So this store sync history is the script that gets called. If you wanted to do your own stuff here, maybe you want to send an email to yourself or to an administrator if the user deletes something, or if a sync takes more than 30 seconds, or if there were any validation errors that occurred during the sync, or if a particular user syncs who really shouldn't be syncing, or anything along those lines. You can modify the script to send yourself an email or take any other action you want after each sync runs. So this was something that we had a lot of requests for, is just more visibility into the operations of the sync. There is a log, a MirrorSync log, that has all this information, but it's hard to read. We mainly use it for troubleshooting purposes. It's not very friendly to get these kinds of things, and it would be very, very difficult to use for reporting purposes. So now that is the sync history database that comes with MirrorSync 7. So let me check any questions at all. Let me jump back and see. All right, so I'm going to keep going. And so my next demo is, I think, potentially the biggest deal in MirrorSync 7. which is the iOS SDK deployment and version update feature. So this is a pre-recorded demo. You'll see why when you see it. It's because it would be difficult to demonstrate this from an iPhone running on my laptop. But let me just start this demo and I'll kind of talk through it as it goes. So what we've got here is the Roswell Rescue application. And this is an application created, a fake application created internally by 360Works to demonstrate how this works. And the idea behind it is it's a pet rescue application, but it's not running FileMaker Go. We've used Xcode and the iOS SDK to package this as a native application, which can then be distributed to your users by sync cable, by mobile device management like Jamf or something like that, or through the App Store, the Apple App Store. So I'm going to let this demo run and I'll explain what's happening. So we're opening up this application and the Roswell Rescue launcher is what's actually being loaded. So when we package this application, we use that new launcher file that I demonstrated earlier, so that we're not, this FileMaker application that you're seeing is not packaged into the Xcode application. All that's packaged into it is that 815 kilobyte launcher file that has a download URL to go and get this application. So that's what just happened, is it went and it got this application. As far as actually using the application, the idea is that it's for pet rescues, so volunteers at a festival or an adoption site or a pet store or something like that would come in here. They would enter all the information about the pets, enter information about who's adopting them, and they don't need to worry about whether or not they have Wi-Fi or cell data at the location. They don't need to worry about turning the device off and losing the connection when they turn it back on. This is a really perfect use case for a syncing application. So I'm going to run this sync. This is the first time I'm running it, so I'm prompted for my device name. It pushes all those changes, and it finishes in 3.486 seconds. I'm going to call your attention to something on this screen that might easily escape your notice. Look at that hub node. Hub node is MySQL/sync adoptions added 1. I'm going to talk about that more in just a second. Now what I want to demonstrate here is version changes. So let's say that I like my pet rescue application, but I'm finding that too many users are accidentally clicking the delete button because it's right next to the edit button. So I'm going to move it to the other side of the screen. And I'm going to edit the color of this delete button so it's not quite as prominent and and quite as tempting to click on. And then I'm going to go into my MirrorSync table in the field definitions. This gets added during the MirrorSync setup process. I'm going to go to the field called database version. And I'm going to change that database version to something different than what it is now. Now I'm going to get back on my device, run my sync. No changes have happened. And now this is the really important part that I wanted to show everybody. There's a database version available named 1.1. If you've used MirrorSync 6 and earlier, you've probably seen the screen before, but I can guarantee you've never seen it on an iOS bundled application, because at least not with MirrorSync, because we were not able to do this previously. And the key here again is that launcher file, because the problem with the problem that we ran into with MirrorSync 6 and deployed applications with iOS is that when you close the main solution file, it exits the application. By making the launcher file the main file, we never close the launcher file, and the launcher file is able to do all the work of closing your old copy of the solution, replacing with the newer version, opening it back up, and then running that initial sync again. So I'm the user, I'm going to click OK here. This is now the launcher file going and getting that new version of the solution. It downloads it. Notice that my changes are there. And this is tremendously easier than repackaging your application as an iPhone.ipa file and sending it to Apple to ask them to put a new version up on the App Store. With this ability to distribute new version updates and this core syncing capabilities, I feel like MirrorSync is really the right tool to use if you're thinking about building an iOS native application that you're going to distribute either for a corporate client base using MDM software, or for the public using the App Store. And so now, having cracked the problem of distributing version updates, it becomes quite usable in a practical sense to do an application like this. So let me come back and talk for a minute again about that MySQL thing that I showed you before. This sync that I just demonstrated, as you could probably guessed by now, is not syncing with FileMaker Server. It is syncing with MySQL. So this, and you know, I mentioned this was possible in my early slide where I had those bullet points of all the different databases that we support. But think about what the implications of this are. You don't need to think of yourself any longer as a FileMaker developer that builds a FileMaker ecosystem with FileMaker Server and FileMaker Go. If you have a customer that has a MySQL database or an Oracle database or a SQL Server or Postgres database or Salesforce database, and they approach you and they say, hey, can you build me a mobile application? You don't need to say, oh, I don't do Xcode, or I don't do Swift, or maybe I do Swift and Xcode and Objective-C, and it's going to take a long time. You can now tell them, yeah, we'd be happy to build that. We're just going to build a little FileMaker application that we're not even going to tell anybody is built in FileMaker. We're going to mirror the same tables and fields that are in your corporate database. We're going to build the UI in this rapid application development tool, and we're going to use MirrorSync as the middle layer so that those things can talk to each other, and they'll be able to work offline and always have a copy of all the data on their device, and all the version updates are going to be handled with it. So this is, I think, the biggest potential feature in MirrorSync 7 is this ability to distribute vertical market applications using MirrorSync 7. So let's get into performance issues, which is my favorite topic to talk about. Oh, and I do see there's a few questions here. Let me stop for just a minute and tackle some of these questions. Will, if you could post the actual questions in the chat, that would be terrific. Can MirrorSync sync client to server one way? Yes, absolutely. You can do a data collection type of sync so that, like for instance, a lot of our MirrorSync customers are basically doing some sort of inspections, inspecting gas pipelines, inspecting chimneys, inspecting road construction, inspecting hurricane cleanup sites, a lot of things along those lines. And so it is very common for MirrorSync to be used in a data collection capacity, where you're not having to load hundreds of thousands or millions of records from the server onto the device. You're basically starting off with the device empty, or maybe you load certain tables and not other tables. And then you can just push those changes from this client to the server as you gather them. And those sync directions can be configured individually per table. So you can say, this table is bidirectional, this one's hub to spoke, and this one is spoke to hub. I'm going to keep going because I'm running a little behind on time, but I'm going to try and come back and answer the other questions as well. Let's talk about performance things. 1 second. Let's talk about performance things. So MirrorSync 7 has a lot of time and attention went into making the syncs much faster than they used to be. There's certain specific operations that I'm going to demonstrate to you that are 13 and 18 times faster. And I'll talk more about those in a second, but I want to talk about I'm going to demo points 1 and 2. Let's talk about point 3, deferred loop flushing. If you recall, and it might have escaped your notice because it wasn't widely publicized, it was you had to kind of read the release notes to know about it, but there's a new feature now in FileMaker 20.3 or later where you can defer loop flushing. So if you're looping, if you're writing a loop script and it goes through a bunch of records and does a thing, you can turn on deferred flushing so that it'll only have to check its relationship graph one time instead of repeatedly checking it for every field that it sets. And this makes almost no performance difference at all if your solution is extremely simple and has like one table occurrence in one table. But it makes a gigantic difference if you have a very complex table occurrence relationship graph. And so I think that's probably more realistic. So I think a lot of you are going to see a significant speed up from this deferred loop flushing feature. We've also implemented a lot of multi-threading behavior so that we write to our internal sync database. We don't need to wait for each write to finish. We just write them all at once on multiple processing cores. So MirrorSync will do a much better job of taking advantage of all the processing cores in your server now. We've also just made a bunch of general FileMaker scripting optimizations for things like concatenating text, checking to see if a field matches before we write it, and just lots of just general performance tweaks. We've also made downloading empty clones a lot faster. In previous versions of MirrorSync, we had to make a backup copy of the full file as well as an empty clone in order to generate that empty clone for a download. Now we use the new FileMaker Server admin feature to do a clone-only download. So my testing has shown that for like a significant size database, it's about 4 times faster, from 30 seconds to 8 seconds. And the last bullet point here is probably, I think, the most significant because it's a very real-world sync, a very real-world example. One of our bigger customers is LifeSource, and LifeSource does home health and nursing care for psychiatric and physical therapy patients. And they have a large database. It's a 33 gigabyte database, 136 tables. They've been using MirrorSync for a very long time, starting from version 2 or 3, I think. And one of their biggest problems has always been distributing new offline copies to their users. Because their database is so large and so complex, it's taken 28 minutes to run the initial sync. So I got a copy of their database from them, and with their permission, I did the exact same sync with no changes to their database except for changing MirrorSync 6 to MirrorSync 7. And their initial syncs went from 28 minutes to 6 minutes and 48 seconds. So that's a more than 4 times speed up there on that initial sync on a real world database. So I think that gives you an idea of what MirrorSync is going to do for your solution. And this is the LifeNotes system right here. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a reference table that they have here with 2,200 records. And I'm going to go to the CPT table, and I'm going to replace that CPT table with the CPT table. So it's basically replacing it with itself, which is going to cause the timestamps to change on every single record in the table. And for my demonstration, I'm going to have MirrorSync 7 running on the left side of my screen and MirrorSync 6 running on the right side of my screen. So MirrorSync 7 is on the left, 6 is on the right. I'm clicking the sync button at the exact same time on both of them. And MirrorSync 7 has just finished. It took 3.813 seconds. MirrorSync 6 is still running on the right. And so what MirrorSync 6 is doing is it's saying, hey, there's 2,200 records in here with an updated modification timestamp. Let me write those 2,200 records from the hub to the spoke. And MirrorSync is fairly fast, but it takes time to write 2,200 records across a network. So this is going to take a little while. MirrorSync 7 on the left has what I'm calling a record hashing feature, where it says, okay, there's 2,200 records that might have changed. I'm going to go to all 2,200 of them. I'm going to download their contents from one device to the MirrorSync server. But before I send them out as an update, I'm just going to do a check on each one to check and see if its record contents match the same record contents from the last time that I saw this record. And if it matches, that tells me that nothing has changed and I don't actually need to update that record. So let me call your attention in that sync complete on the left. And by the way, the sync is running on the right. It looks paused, but it's not. On the left, it just added 2 records to the activity tables. It didn't make any changes to the coding table, which is where I made my replace operation, because it skipped all of them because none of them had actually changed. On the right side, it had to update all 2,200 records, and it took 70 seconds. So this example shows you that MirrorSync, in this particular case, MirrorSync ran 18 times faster than it did. MirrorSync 7 was 18 times faster than MirrorSync 6 because of that ability to check the record contents and see if they've been modified. So now I'm going to show you a similar demo, but in this case, I've got a photos database. It's got 204 records in it. I'm going to go to this table, and I'm actually going to make a change to the record. So this is a real change. If MirrorSync were to look at the contents here, it would see that they actually changed. So I'm changing all of these things from image to photo, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have MirrorSync 7 on the left, MirrorSync 6 on the right. I'm going to start both syncs running at the exact same time as each other. And so they're running out, and this time we can't cheat like we did before. I don't know if cheat's the right word. We can't shortcut it because there actually was a change that was made on all of those records. So MirrorSync does need to write all of the records. So why did it finish so fast? It only took 7.2 seconds, even though you can see in the status there that it modified 204 records. And it's still running on the right. So what's the deal here? And the deal is that we, as I talked about before, we do a check on the record contents to see if they've changed. But then we also do a record check, a container check on each individual container to see if it's changed. So we changed the record contents, but we did not change the container contents. So MirrorSync was smart enough to just skip over those container fields and just write all the non-container data, which is much, much faster from one to the other. And so that finished in 7.2 seconds. And we've always recommended that with MirrorSync 6 and earlier, we've always recommended splitting your container fields into their own separate table to avoid the problem that you would have. Like, let's just say you've got an inspection record and you take pictures of fireplaces, and you take a dozen pictures, and so you've got a dozen container fields in the same record as your job table. You sync that, and it takes a while because you're syncing 12 photos, and then you go and you change the job from active to complete, and you run the sync again. In MirrorSync 6, that's going to sync that change to just the status field, but it's also going to rewrite all 12 of your containers. So in MirrorSync 7, that's no longer something you have to worry about. It's now safe from a MirrorSync standpoint to keep your containers in the same table as your other non-container data, and MirrorSync will be smart enough to skip over them if nothing has changed in them. And so that finished in 7 seconds in MirrorSync 7, 96 seconds in MirrorSync 6. So that is a real world speed up there of 13 times faster. And now what I'm going to talk about is, this is the one that I was saying was the very last feature that I added, which probably should have been the first feature I added because it's a really cool one. If you've used MirrorSync before and you have a large database, you're probably familiar with the problem of initial syncs taking a long time. So let me start this running, and I'll narrate it a little bit as I go. So what I have here is we have a download URL that we've sent to the client to run the initial sync on the server. And again, if you've used MirrorSync 6 before, you've probably seen a similar screen. It looks nicer now, thanks to Will. But you've probably seen a similar screen where you're prompted for a username and password so that the initial sync can run on the server. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to put in our username and password, but we're also going to fill in this optional email address field, which we didn't have before. And so I'm putting in my username, I'm putting in my password, I'm filling in my email address. And what's going to happen now is that once I click my sync button, instead of the sync actually running on MirrorSync 7 on the left, you can see this message that says initial sync is running. You'll receive an email at such and such. When the file is complete and ready to download, you may close this browser window. So nothing is happening on the device here, on the iPad or the iPhone or the laptop. You don't need to worry about the user losing their network during the sync. You don't need to worry about the device going to sleep during the sync. You don't need to worry about FileMaker Pro quitting during the sync. You don't need to worry about a network error corrupting a record as it goes across the network, because all of the sync is happening. That initial sync right now is happening on the server. And so all we need to do is just wait for an email to come in saying you're ready to go, which we just got. So now we can click that link and download that file. And so now here's our file already finished, ready to go. So I'm going to flip through it. I can see that all my records are there because the initial sync is already finished. I'm going to run my sync. And this is going to be very fast because it's not an initial sync. It's the first sync on this device, but the initial sync was done on the server. This is just a fast incremental change. So this finishes in 1.4 seconds. In the meantime, we're still running on the right side. It will eventually finish, but this is what you would see with MirrorSync 6 and earlier, is that if anything happens to the device during the sync, it's not going to get that file, and the user would have to start all over again. So it finished there in 111 seconds, as opposed to 1.4 seconds for that initial sync, for that first sync on the device for the user. So lots of big speed improvements here. Not only is this just faster, but it's a much, much better user experience. You know, a user doesn't want to sit there and wait 5 minutes, 20 minutes. You know, we talked about LifeSource and how it was taking 28 minutes to run that initial sync. LifeSource used to have to tell all their users, sync this up, but make sure you set your iPad to never go to sleep and just put it on your nightstand or something like that and run it and come back and check on it later. They don't have to do that anymore. Now they can use this initial server-side sync with an email notification to say, run your sync, check your email. If it's ready, you'll have an email when it's ready. So that's my demos. Let me talk a little bit about pricing, and then I'll try to answer a few questions. Everything I just demoed for you is available at MirrorSync.com. The videos that I just showed you can be seen there as well. As I talked about with Cindy at EPB, MirrorSync is totally free for one device. There's no limitations or expiration. It's not a trial or a demo. It is the full version of the product for one device, and that's totally free. If you need more than one device, those additional devices are priced somewhere between $400 to $750, $750 per month, with price of $750 and then going down to $4 as the quantity increases. And we do have special device pricing for 1,000 devices that's not advertised on our website. So if you're doing a large corporate application or you are building like a vertical market application, contact us for that price bundle, and we'll get you set up with that. We've simplified the server-to-server pricing. It doesn't matter anymore about which types of servers that you're running. All server-to-server syncs are now priced at $115 per month, regardless if it's FileMaker to FileMaker, FileMaker to MySQL, MySQL to Oracle, etc. They're all priced that way, and that is per pair of servers. So if you have FileMaker server to FileMaker server, that's $115 per month. We do offer FileMaker server hosting services, and we include MirrorSync hosting with that at no extra cost. You still need to purchase the license for MirrorSync, but you don't need to worry about what kind of load it's going to put on your server or set up a separate box for MirrorSync, because we host that for you at no extra cost. For the people who are on this call that are Claris partners, I have two pieces of good news for you. One is that MirrorSync, as well as all of our other products, is available for not for resale license for your own internal use, not for your customers, not for you to sell to your customers, but just for your own use as a Claris partner. So if that sounds interesting, contact us, and we have very special pricing for that for Claris partners. We also have reseller pricing for Claris partners. So if you're a Claris partner and you're recommending this to your customers, we want you to get paid a commission. So contact us so that you can get a discount on that, so you can make a commission on that. Our email address is support@360works.com, and we can do all of the integration and configuration for you. We've designed MirrorSync to be pretty straightforward to set up, but sometimes things get really complicated, or sometimes you just want the assurance of knowing that the people who wrote the software are also the ones configuring it. So contact us at that same email address if you would like our help doing any sort of integration and configuration. I'm going to take some questions. We're pretty close to time here. I do want to point out that we want to produce more videos like this, so use the subscribe button and like button in the YouTube channel if you would like to get notified when things come out. And I would love to answer some questions. I'm going to take a look at the chats here and see what we've got. And I'm going to keep going until all the questions are answered. So, stick around or disconnect, whatever everybody feels like, but I'll make sure all these questions are answered before I stop the stream. Can you translate table of contents names and field names to more understandable phrases for ordinary users? I don't think there's any reason that the users generally need to see the names of the fields. I don't think MirrorSync in general displays field names to users, but I might be missing the question there. So if you would repost that on the chat and help me understand what you're looking for, that'd be great. Or just email us at support@360works.com. How far are these servers from each other? So we did a webinar a couple of years ago. I need to get back on Richard Carlton's session and do this again. But we had a fun demo where we did a server-to-server sync with a server in Los Angeles, New York, London, Mumbai, and Sydney. So we had 5 different FileMaker servers all set up, all syncing every 30 seconds to each other. The New York server was the hub, and the other 4 were the spokes. We set it to sync every 30 seconds, and it was really fun because we actually got all of the people from Richard Carlton's webinar, from his live stream, to all log on to those different servers around the world and all make changes to them and see each other's changes. So there's no limitation on the distance between the servers, and I hope that answers that question. This is a really good question. Is upgrade from 6 to 7 a simple install and perhaps update MirrorSync scripts? Yes, Stephen, absolutely. And Stephen, actually, I know I've got a ticket for you that I need to reply to. Adam and I are working on your issue right now, by the way. I think you're on version 6 right now. I would love to get you upgraded to 7. Yes, it is a very simple install. I should have talked about this more. The process is really at its core, at its most simplest, you simply install MirrorSync 7 on your same FileMaker server over on top of MirrorSync 6. Your old scripts will still work, your old offline files will still work, the old sync data will still work, everything will still work. There's no need to uninstall, there's no mandatory need to distribute new offline copies. With that said, you're not going to get all the speed improvements of MirrorSync 7 if that's all you do. You'll get some of them. Some of them, like the multi-threaded write operations, will happen just by doing what I just said. But if you want to get the full set of speed benefits in MirrorSync 7 and all the features, you will want to replace the MirrorSync 6 worker script with the MirrorSync 6 worker script that comes with MirrorSync 7. And by the way, just as a little bit of a trivia, we know that we didn't change the names of the scripts. We intentionally kept the script names MirrorSync 6 because it makes it easier to do this exact thing, to migrate from one version to another. So just replace that worker script, and then whenever your users get a new offline copy with that new script, they'll get the speed up benefits from that. But it is totally backwards compatible with the old version 6 offline files that everybody has. Let me jump back to questions. Okay, that's that one we've already answered. Do you have how-to videos from Rob? Hey Rob, how you doing? We have not done we do have how-to videos, but many of them were filmed for version 5 or early versions of 6. We are going to do a better job of updating those videos with 7. The process is identical. So yeah, really the answer to your question is yes. If you look on YouTube and you do a search for MirrorSync configuration, on our channel, you'll see examples of how to configure MirrorSync. There's going to be cosmetic differences between the old versions of MirrorSync that we did this with and the new versions. But I think the process is pretty much unchanged in terms of configuring version 6 versus configuring version 7. And we will update those. Dialogues and conflict resolution use table occurrence names and field names. I see. Okay, thank you for that clarification. No, we have no way of controlling or overriding the names of those fields on that screen. If that is very important to you, contact me and we will figure out a solution for it. In the meantime, what I would say is use the admin picks model so that at least you only need to train one person on what the field names mean in case your field names are hard to understand. And we can work together on coming up with some sort of mapping file or something like that to rename the fields that the user is seeing. Maybe we could do something like automatically read them from the comment of the field, for instance. So if that's important, contact us at support@360works.com. We'll talk about how to do that. Do you have experience syncing into China mainland from Europe or the US? I do know that one of our large customers is operating entirely within China. They have one server in Hong Kong and one server in mainland China, and that is successfully syncing, and that's a server-to-server sync, and it's a high-volume sync. I can't say for certain whether or not we've had cases of people syncing into mainland China from outside, but the main requirements that you need to be aware of is that MirrorSync from wherever it's running needs to be able to initiate an HTTP connection to each of the servers in the sync. And then the servers also need to be able to initiate an HTTP connection back to MirrorSync. So if you've got a server behind, say, network address translation, let's say your MirrorSync server is behind network address translation and it's not publicly accessible, it's not going to work to sync between two external servers unless those external servers are configured to be able to establish a connection through NAT back to the MirrorSync server. So I can't answer the question specifically about syncing into China, but that's a more general answer that I hope answers that. And if it doesn't, contact us at support and we'll do a test together and we'll figure that out. Any way to customize the MirrorSync splash screen during the sync? Yes, absolutely. You just simply go into layout mode, you go to the MirrorSync layout. Don't remove tables and fields. We want those tables and fields to stay there, but it's okay to move them off to the side and then substitute your own everything that you want. We have a lot of customers. That's a frequent thing that our customers do is they'll reskin that MirrorSync dialog that pops up during the sync. And it's just FileMaker layout, so you can use all the tools you're already familiar with in layout mode. I have had trouble with an iOS device going to sleep while syncing. Happens often due to large photos and slow internet connections. Any progress here? So The initial sync that I showed you, I think will be a good answer for the initial sync, which is usually the thing that takes a long time and causes those timeouts. As far as an incremental sync, no, we don't have, there is no way that I'm aware of that a FileMaker Go application can force the iOS device to not fall asleep. You know, we're making a network connection to MirrorSync every 20 seconds. So basically, when there's a long thing happening, the MirrorSync client software, the FileMaker script is going to the MirrorSync server and saying, is there anything ready for me? And the MirrorSync server will wait 10 seconds and reply back and say, not yet, try again. And that'll happen every 10 seconds. So there's a constant stream of network activity going on. But in my experience, I think that will not prevent the iOS device screen from disabling and losing the network connection. So I think that if you have incremental syncs that take a long time, the only solution there is to instruct your users to extend the lock screen timeout on their device. Hopefully, some of the changes that we've made, like for instance, the one that I talked about where we don't sync containers on every sync if they already match, might speed the sync up enough that that's not a necessary workaround. But that's what I would recommend investigating there. I think, Will, did I miss any questions? If you see any that I skipped over, go ahead and paste them again, but I think I've covered them all. So we are doing great as far as time goes. My last slide here is just a restatement of the slides that I showed you before. Just to reiterate some of the things that we talked about. We talked about how you can use the iOS SDK deployment with MirrorSync to deploy your FileMaker Go solutions to FileMaker Go with iOS, sync those and distribute version updates, and potentially sync them with a non-FileMaker server backend if that's an important business case for you. We talked about the initial sync with the server side, with the server side initial sync with the email notifications, and demonstrated that you don't need to have your users sit there and wait for that sync to finish. We showed the launcher file, how it opens in far less clicks than it did, and how it supports multi-file solutions. Demonstrated some of those major speed improvements for you. Showed off the sync history database, and while we didn't demo the admin API or the documentation, those are things that are talked about in the documentation if you want to look at that admin API. Looks like we got all the questions. Thank you guys very much. I really appreciate your time and your interest in MirrorSync 7. I love talking about this stuff. You've got my email address, also the support at 360works.com. Frankly, I check the support email before my own email, so if you have questions, probably the best thing to do is send an email to support at 360works.com. I look forward to hearing from you and find out what you're doing with MirrorSync 7. Thanks very much, guys.